At the beginning of 2023, Living Archive Milton Keynes started a huge call out on our social media for your memories of the Point. We hosted a down memory lane session in the Point itself as part of the MK Heritage Open Days in September 2023. The memories you see in this film are gleaned from the people who volunteered to be interviewed as a result of this campaign and the down memory lane session at the Point.
It was incredibly exciting. It was a slice of America on our doorstep, and although that might not seem very exciting today, it was pretty phenomenal back then.
It gave a focus to life that was perhaps missing in central Milton Keynes in the 80s.
Come out of the grim 70s where it was all a bit grey, and it was just absolutely, it was just shining light, shining over the whole centre, and it was just like you couldn't wait to get in there to find out what was going on.
It was just a really exciting time. It was the place to be.
It was like going on holiday. It was just a totally different world.
There was nothing like it. You've got to remember today, you're used to seeing it. You can turn on YouTube, look at Las Vegas and places like that, and Dubai. But we were the forefront. Milton Keynes was the forefront back in the day.
The shopping centre was up and running, at least in part. Now we were seriously getting into more leisure development.
It was a site which we know well now, the site of the Point, which had a permitted use for bars, restaurants, club, bingo and cinema was the final element. And nobody wanted to know about a cinema. It was banging your head against a brick wall. And I got this call from reception one day, and they said that there's a gentleman in reception wanted to speak to somebody about the initial leisure entertainment facility. And this guy, Scott Wallace, he explained that AMC were American multi-cinema. He explained the concept of multi-screen cinemas, which were unheard of in Britain at the time. And he was charged by AMC to bringing multi-cinema over to Europe. And coincidentally, the day before, I'd had Bass Leisure, who had said that they would be pleased to do all of the entertainment complex, but they knew nothing about cinema. They couldn't do cinema. And Scott stood there and said, "We want to do the cinemas, but we don't want anything else of it." So I said, "There's a man you should meet." The cinemas were always going to be a square, flat box. They can't have windows. They don't need detailing in any way on the outside. And so the architects saw the sense in having a feature at the front that housed the bingo, the bars and the club. And they designed it as a pyramid. What happens is, as you get further out to the edges of the pyramid, you lose space because you're losing headroom as fast as you're gaining extra space. And so the Bass team came into us one day, having sold us the idea of a pyramid, saying we're going to change it to a ziggurat. And so it went to committee, and of course by then all the committee and the board were desperately keen to get this thing in. And I suspect if they'd come with just a box on the front of another box, we'd probably have said yes.
Nearly 2 decades after the town's inception, it boasts the Point, a £7.5 million leisure palace.
When they built it, they wanted it to be, these were the words that were used in some of the PR, was like colourful during the day and a real landmark. They built it as a landmark for Milton Keynes, and of course until recently that's exactly what it has been.
AMC Cinemas welcome you to the world of multi-screen cinema.
Point was at the centre of culture, and you could see it from 15 miles from the south, or 15 miles from the north, or 15 miles coming from Buckingham.
You could see the Point in the distance. You knew, I'm home, I'm nearly home now.
Whether you're travelling from Oxford or from Bedford or up from London or down from Northampton, the one thing you could see in Milton Keynes was the illuminations on the Point.
You know, even when you're coming home from your holidays and you're flying into Luton at night, you'd look out the window and you think, oh, there's the Point, I'm nearly home.
That triangle of lights coming in. I remember coming back from Essex, seeing family, and the excitement I got. And I'd get my dad to come off the motorway early so that we could come down the A5. And the tallest thing you could see in the distance was like Las Vegas.
At different periods of my childhood and my teenage years, the Point just was a focus. You know, I mean, it was a focus for everybody. You could see it from miles away, couldn't you? But it was very much a focus and somewhere that, you know, friendships were formed in the good times I had, really.
I first went to the Point when it first opened, and we came to see Back to the Future, which I think was the first film that they ever put on there. I think it was the one that they opened with.
I was invited to the opening night and saw Scott Wallace across the other side of the main reception area. He came rushing across, shook me by the hand and said, Steve, this is it," he said. "This is the rebirth of British cinema, and we were there." And it still sends a shiver up my spine when I tell that story. That's because it's true, you know. The cinema was dying until that meeting between Scott and I.
I still remember the very first day I came, I saw Santa Claus the movie with Dudley Moore. And I remember telling my dad in the car on the way home, will our car take off? Because his sleigh took, and just seeing it on that big screen format, because before that it was Bletchley. And I think I saw one of the Supermans there. When you came here, walking into that foyer, seeing just the lights and the signs and the digital display outside, there was nothing like it.
After it had been opened a couple of days, I was speaking to one of the chaps that was instrumental in building it, and his memory of it was that a young lad had bought some salted popcorn and poured tomato ketchup over it. And Stanley Durwood had actually said, and him had said, "Why have you just done that?" And he'd been there the night before apparently and was forced to share with his friends, and he knew that if he put ketchup on it he wouldn't need to share it. So effectively he ruined his popcorn, but it meant he could have it all himself. I love that story. I think it's just, you know, epitomises how exciting this place was to everybody really.
The first multi-screen cinema in the United Kingdom. People couldn't get their head around the fact there's 10 screens. I remember people saying, well, who's going to go and see 10 movies?
The attendance goal for the first year was 760,000 and they did 1,050,000, which was more than Leicester Square did. To be so much more successful than Leicester Square, which was the most successful one in the country at that first year, just speaks volumes. And Milton Keynes wasn't anywhere near as big as it is today, so people were travelling in for that, you know, or else the people local were going again and again and again.
They had a couple of movie premieres there as well. One of which I remember particularly was a film called Inner Space with Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan, and I was lucky enough to be reporting on the premiere of the movie there.
I think I must have gone to every premiere that they had, and it was quite funny because I'd get the VIP ticket somehow. I don't know how I managed it looking back, but you'd be walking up sort of the red carpet with all these stars and people behind the crash barrier, and they'd all be sort of looking as if to say, who's he? You know, and I just remember sort of walking in on one of them and the lights and the cameras, and I think, how did they make it all look so easy? Because I just felt like I was dazzled like headlights, you know. But it was great fun, you know, you'd be in the middle of sort of trying to get served for popcorn or Coke or whatever, and there'd be a Coronation Street star in front of you, and of course the staff behind the bar were sort of, oh, come and have an autograph. And then when it came to me, it was sort of like, yes, what do you like, sir? And there's your popcorn, and, you know, get lost sort of thing.
I was involved with the first Marlborough Scout group. We were given the invitation. We've got a special visitor coming to be a guest of honour at the Point, and we'd like some guards of honour. Would your scouts and your cubs like to be the guard of honour for our important visitor? And the guest of honour turned out to be Princess Fergie. She had a very nice car and an entourage with her, and the crowds were very pleased to see her, and she waved to everybody, and she sort of nodded politely at these children and just walked past. And she may have stopped and spoken to one or two, but it seemed like it sort of said it was very much, I'm the guest of honour and everybody follow me. So I thought was a bit not so good, but hey ho.
There was nowhere else to go. Friday night, Saturday night, you're going to go to the Point, you're going to go clubbing, you're going to eat in a restaurant, you're going to drink in the bar, you're going to go and see a movie. Sunday night, and of course there was the bingo hall downstairs, was a huge thing at the time as well. Mecca bingo, people would flood down there. So you had slightly older generation going to play the bingo, slightly younger going to eat in the restaurant, slightly younger drinking in the bar, slightly younger going up to the club, and then everyone going to the cinema as well. So it was like a one-stop shop of entertainment that the likes of Britain had never seen anything like it before.
So we came through the main entrance. The highlight of the night was choosing which bar to go to. You had a left and a right bar. And the door to the right led you up to the nightclub upstairs. But of course, you know, we all went for drinks first.
I got a job there at the club at the Point, working at the club, and it was so much fun. There were two bars at the Point. There was the cocktail bar, which I don't think I ever worked at actually. You aspired to work at the cocktail bar, but I didn't. I worked at the Oval Bar. It was like being paid to party, so what's not to love?
It was a good fun place to meet up with my work colleagues, you know, especially on a Friday or a Saturday evening. We used to sort of wind down and have a few drinks and meet at the club. It's very handy, it's very close by. Save us going to places like Luton or Bedford, you know.
There were 4 different drinks that were £1 each, and one of those was Jack Daniels and Coke. I mean, for £1 on a Thursday night, that's all right, isn't it?
You just knew that even if you came here on your own, maybe your friends couldn't make it that particular night. There was the atmosphere, you felt safe, it was busy, there was always somebody either at that bar or that bar that you met the week before, or you were friends in general. And of course, at a certain point, the doors were open then. I think we had bouncers then on the door to let you up to the nightclub. And it was just a fantastic night, always.
And each night had a different theme. So there was a 60s night, there was a blues night. Friday and Saturday was kind of dancey nights. But the best nights were the nights where they had people come in and do events.
It was the Stock Aitken Waterman era where you had the Unpop acts dancing to a backing track. I think Mel and Kim did a personal appearance in the club at the Point, and there were other personal appearances. And this was at a time that this was something new for nightclubs.
The whole kind of sneaking into clubs thing was very, very big and it was quite easy to do because 80s fashion, I think, was very aspirational. So everybody dressed like they were an extra from Dynasty going to a cocktail party. And so it was quite easy to make yourself look older than you really were because you'd be wearing these very grown-up looking clothes and tons of makeup, and so you could pass for being in your 20s quite easily when you were nothing like. And that's what we all used to do.
The Marlborough girls used to turn up and they would fill your cigarette packets. That doesn't happen anymore, does it?
To start with, it appeared to be very exclusive. In other words, the dress code was very much jacket, shirt, tie, shoes, not like you see it today. So I do remember coming up here, and I remember me and my pals were out somewhere else, and we didn't have a tie. And I remember the doorman keeping us there for 10 minutes, trying to work out whether they were going to let us in. So they let us in, we undid the top button. If you saw the faces of the people in the club, it was like, how have they got in without a tie? That's how exclusive it was. And I think the point for me was exclusive. It was class.
Thursday night is rock night in the Point, so get in there for about 9 o'clock and leave at 2 in the morning. As soon as the song started, like you'd know who'd get up and dance that one. Like if it was a bit of a goth song, you knew which group of friends would get up and go and dance to that. If it was like a bit softer, it's like most would just stand and look at each other. But most of the time we'd be up dancing.
It doesn't matter what you're into, does it? If you go to a local working men's club, everybody has their chair, don't they? And actually the Point Rock Club was like that. We always had a specific sofa, myself and my friends. It used to be just to the side of where the DJ booth was. And it was just really fun, good times.
Music was fairly low to start with, and then you get this enormous kind of Space Odyssey 2001, whatever it was, type music, loads of mist, and that's when the night started. Seriously, it was amazing.
Well, actually, I met my first husband in the club at the Point. So it really did bring people together. You know, I wouldn't have my children if it wasn't for the club. So there's a legacy for the club.
Among the venues, there was the brasserie and the brasserie bar and the restaurant and the bar. You could have a meal which would be a starter, a main, a dessert and coffee for as little as £7.50 a head, which included things like Maryland chicken and steak, all sorts of things that I don't eat, being meat free. But for £7.50 a head for 4 courses really is just incredible, isn't it? And one of the key things at that time, back in 1985, was that a printer was located in the kitchen which would receive clear information on people's orders to make it a smooth process. I mean, you just can't, can you? It's, you know, these things went into the press information as wow factors, and of course the thing is we're laughing, but they were wow factors. Everything starts somewhere, and the Point was way ahead of its time, you know.
With the opening of the Point, we saw the demise of those older style cinemas because the Point was the place to be. And then as the Point became sort of jaded, it didn't have, for example, stadium seating. The seating was never very good in there. You never really had a good view of the screen. The screens were quite small, the sound was never great. People fell out of love of going to that particular cinema when there were other options coming along in the city, Cineworld, for example.
I've been keeping a diary since the 80s, and the Point gets quite a lot of mentions. It very, very quickly went from being this just amazing place that blew us all away to, I mean, by 1990, when I'm writing about, and this week I went to see such and such, I would be saying, this week I went to the Flea Pit to watch such and such. So it had a quite rapid fall from grace.
We had larger nightclubs opening, so all of a sudden the club at the Point was a little bit too small, wasn't big enough for this huge nighttime economy. And Milton Keynes had a huge nighttime economy back in the 90s.
The Winter Gardens opened not long after, and that had a nightclub with Zazoos, which kind of quickly took over from the Point nightclub as being one of the, the place you wanted to go. And there were loads and loads of eateries like Houston's, a Tex-Mex restaurant, and bars and things. All of a sudden the Point had to compete with all of that. And then not long after the Winter Gardens had opened, the Leisure Plaza opened as well. So all of a sudden the Point, which had stood alone a bit when it first opened, suddenly had all these other things to compete with.
Bingo was losing its appeal to people. the food in the restaurant at the Point started to dip in quality and people were choosing not to go there. So slowly over time, people gravitated away from the Point and it never recaptured its glory.
In spite of refurbishments in 1995 and 2005, the Point continued to struggle. In 2007, the pizza restaurant and nightclub closed due to lack of business. The premises remained empty before becoming a YMCA-funded cafe and a Connections Careers office. By 2009, the illuminated lights on the ziggurat no longer lit up at night. The last film was shown in the cinema in 2015, and in 2020, the bingo hall closed. 35 years since it first opened, all of the Point's entertainment and hospitality attractions had closed down for good. The dilapidated building has been occupied over the years by a number of local charitable groups.
I find it incredibly sad that we're going to lose the Point. I think it really is a rich part of our heritage, and it should be, in my opinion, it should be preserved.
What are we going to value in architecture? Are we going to value the building itself as an object, or can we begin to actually look at our heritage values as looking at what the people feel about the building? I think the memories and the imagination that's attached to this building is really diverse and layered. And in a town that has a history that's actually in some ways quite thin compared to other cities and towns in the UK, actually when you look at a building like this, you see that the meaning that's being applied to this new town, and particularly this building, actually is really thick. And the way that people believe in the new town is, and the pride that people have here is really interesting.
There is the nostalgia to it, absolutely. I mean, we all look back on the past and say it's better than the present. I actually think it totally is at the moment, but we all say that, don't we? But I think, does it matter if if they'd have knocked the Tower of London down pretty soon after? We wouldn't be looking at that now, would we? And saying what an amazing place that is and how rich our history. And I'm really not comparing the Point to that, but actually in its field of what it was in entertainment, it absolutely was that. The whole purpose of it was the first fully integrated entertainment centre in Europe, where you could literally go watch a film, go and get some dinner, watch some live music. We're used to going to the O2 and things like wherever you choose to go and having all that now, but it just wasn't there. We didn't have things like that, and that's why there was such a buzz about it.
Recently I've been doing lots of Milton Keynes artwork just to show the other side of Milton Keynes, what Milton Keynes could be, what it has been, what it should be, and a mashup of the two. So my motto is all this has happened before and all this will happen again. And the Point has always been there for me since I was here in the 80s, and it's still here now, despite it not being used and being run down. It's still here. So I project that in my artwork. This one particularly showed, it was, even though it's in the future, an apocalyptic world and the Point's still here, it was really to depict that, how it's been left to run down over 20 years. And it should have been looked after and made beautiful, but it hasn't. This depicts it, the shambles it's been left in. I keep coming back to the Point because it is iconic. It divides opinion, because I say the younger generation have never seen anything but an eyesore. Some of the older generation don't like it because it's become an eyesore. But I still have a vision of what it could be, and I think it's so short-sighted that they haven't used it.
In 2012, the Point's owners Hammerson proposed plans to restructure the building as a new shopping and leisure complex and asked for feedback from the public in an open consultation. The plans were protested by some, given the building's history. An application to Historic England for the building to be listed was rejected on the grounds that it lacked any architectural merit. In 2022, the building was purchased by Galliard Homes, who are planning to demolish the original structure and replace it with a new housing and leisure development.
The principle of knocking down the point and redeveloping it has already been established.
The current plans for the point are to kind of take a building which is kind of quite underutilized and to redevelop it into kind of a more dynamic and vibrant mixed-use development that is perhaps more appropriate for a city centre location. This would involve a lot more residential uses, as well as bringing more leisure and commercial uses down to the ground plane and trying to actually further activate the street edges, make somewhere that is a little bit more kind of vibrant and active, both in the day, but also in the evening and at the weekends. One of the things that we love about Milton Keynes is the greenery. We know that the trees are quite an important part of the city centre. And what we want to do really is to enhance that and bring that greenery onto the site. And then also to utilise all the roofs and then create more green space on the roof. And the council, I think, based on where we were in the city centre and based on the site, did push us to be a bit more bold in certain areas.
This is the heart of Milton Keynes. You want to be building something that reflects on that. Let's build something that's fantastic, that's fabulous. We're not, we're not just here to make money. We're here to be fabulous for the city.
What we discussed with the council and with our team was to create that centerpiece within the city centre. And for us, that was taking one of the residential buildings, which was the tallest, and actually making it a little bit different from the rest of the site. A lot of people speak about the point in the 80s and early 90s that it was a beacon, a sign of coming home. And this was something that was really important in our early design discussions with the council in terms of what this meant in terms of new development. When the point was first built, it was one of the tallest buildings in the city centre. But obviously since then, the city centre is evolving, it's growing. Escape was built. Escape was a big building. Hotel Le Tour has been built. The relationship you had with the point is a bit disconnected now. You don't see it from afar as you perhaps did when it was first built in the 80s. So we looked at trying to reestablishing that visual connection, which was having a tall element that rose above some of the newer buildings. It's created this beacon that uses the idea of the original point, but isn't replicating the point in itself. It's just using the idea of the current materials. And then coming down to ground, the tower comes down to ground. We create a new public square that's conceptualized as a red carpet. So working with the landscape architects, they've taken the idea that all these film premieres used to be at the point. So they kind of created this design, this narrative with red paving and red tiles that symbolizes a red carpet. And I think that for us is creating something that is unique to central Milton Keynes and Milton Keynes as a whole. It's not something you necessarily find in another city or another town. It's something that we want to be of Milton Keynes.
Galliard Holdings' proposals to redevelop the point, along with the neighbouring cinema, and replace them with 4 blocks of flats of up to 21 stories, were unanimously rejected on July the 18th, 2024 by Milton Keynes councillors, in line with the planning officer's recommendation. There was particular criticism of the plans for not delivering an acceptable level of affordable housing and having, quote, no convincing justification of public benefits to outweigh the harm to heritage assets. Galliard Holdings are appealing the decision, but for the moment, the iconic Point building remains.
I don't know anyone who's got a bad memory of having been there. You know, it was exciting. It did what it promised to do, didn't it? It caused excitement and became a real focus.
It was just fantastic nightlife, you know, before everything else was built, the theatre district and everything. This was the main point.
it had that romantic appeal because it became something that people in Milton Keynes could identify with. It was unique, it was something they could be proud of. And I think that's stuck with the generation, the 80s, the 90s generation, and that's why there is this love of the venue.
I guess what made it so different and so exciting was just because it was very, very glamorous, and we were very, very young. We were all young in a new city, and it felt like something new and exciting to do. And for a while it was.